Are you tired and exhausted from all the personal development? Are you tired of scrolling through YouTube and seeing all this advice? And are you trying to make sense of this AI world and everything's developing and you're feeling overwhelmed and your nervous system is completely overwhelmed and you're thinking, oh my God, I got to improve on my business life. I got to improve on my personal life. And then I got to try to find a partner throughout all of this. And then somehow I got to make sense on how to be a man in this world. And then I got to be this person. I got to be that person. I got to do this thing. This podcast is for you. I'm Mathew, and welcome to the Great Men Are Built podcast. Excited to have you here, ready to drop in. So whether you're driving on your way to work, you got me in your ear in your gym, I'm going to help you get a bit of a pump on, or you're going for a walk, or you're doing dishes at your house. Whatever you're doing while you're listening to this, drop in and let's get excited because this is going to be a very powerful podcast. And by the way, if you're a man that is in their late 20s to 30s and you're looking to get into a relationship and you're just kind of confused, you've never been taught this stuff, this man to woman communication, and you don't want to be this sleazy pickup guy and learn the pickup techniques. Well, we have a community here. Actually, it's called Authentic Attraction Club. And if you click the link below, you'll get access to joining our club. And this club is a club of men where it's not where we're going to pull you down or we're going to make fun of you because you don't know how to talk to women. We're not in high school anymore, okay? We've elevated past that way. And you don't want to be that sleazy guy that's learning this pickup stuff, but you just didn't maybe have a father or a role model to teach you the specific techniques on how to actually do man to woman communication from an authentic place, not from some weird place that you're not and trying to kind of compensate for being something you're not. No, you're just wanting to actually know the fundamentals of how do you make your mind not go blank? How do you know what to say? When do you say the right things? What are the right things to actually say? How to build authentic attraction levels? All these deeper nuanced stuff that can I not really talked about. Click the link below, check out our community. Love to have you there and see you inside. So let's get into this podcast today. Are you tired and exhausted from all this personal development? Well, this journey takes me back to Costa Rica. And before I talk about my journey in Costa Rica, I have to lay a foundation of why I was in Costa Rica. So I was 25 years old. And like most young men that are 25 years old, and if you're 25 watching this, you can skip levels, by the way. I was where you were when you were watching this. Someone on YouTube was sharing something to me, and I was able to skip levels. And this was my version of skipping levels. Now, hopefully, I'm going to skip levels for you, right? Because this is pretty wild. You just get to go inside my brain for the next hour, and I'm going to unpack a lot of these things and help you to start stacking thought streams, right? Because this is really what we want to do is we're going to start stacking thought streams together, which then start to create awarenesses. Once you develop these awarenesses, you can start understanding how to see through the fabric and the codes of reality and start getting what you want out of life. And I don't know about you, but that is what's been driving me. That's been what I wanted. And I wanted to live a happier, healthier, vibrant, dynamic health, have a good friend group, have money in the bank, do what I want, and have a great impact on people. And so when I was listening to where you are right now, I would listen to my YouTube mentors or my YouTube fathers, and they'd help me develop. And now this is what you're doing here is I'm going to help you develop your mind and start stacking awarenesses so that you can start to understand reality at a bit more of a nuanced level, but nothing too crazy. So I was back at 25 and I was in Vancouver. And at the time, I just started learning law of attraction. Now, I don't know if you've heard of law of attraction. You have some understandings of law of attraction. I knew I didn't have much of a base of understanding. But if you look at the book behind me, The 48 Laws of Power, the preface of the book or the preface of the book talks about there's a huge power at play in being naive because you don't know what you don't know. But if you connect that wisdom with what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, if you haven't heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, something I would encourage you to do is just while you're listening to podcasts or while you're listening to YouTube videos, put me on pause and just write down the Dunning-Kruger effect and then come back to this podcast because there's things that are going to be said where you don't want to get left behind, but you don't want to also lose the thought stream. So this is something I do on my practices when people like I'm listening to and they say a concept I don't understand, I'll just pause, write it down, or do a quick search in Google, get the core concept, come back to the podcast, keep the momentum going. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect essentially is where you don't know what you don't know and you think you're really confident. And that's where I was at the beginning of my time in Vancouver, using the law of attraction. And from that standpoint, while I was in the Vancouver using the law of attraction, I started to get a lot of traction. I started getting a lot of results. I ended up opening up my own float center. I was a part business owner of a float center here in Vancouver, and I opened that up. That was an incredible experience. I was way over my head in everything to do with business and partnership and emotions and all these types of things. By the way, I was probably about 8 or 9 months sober at the time, so I just on my sobriety journey, and ended up moving downtown Vancouver. And during that time period, that's where I really started to take self-development seriously, and I started putting more effort into understanding myself. I was reading books, I was doing cold baths, jumping in the ocean, I was working out, I did CrossFit. I was a self-development dummy, you know. I was motivated and I was ready to go, and I was ready to charge. I mean, my testosterone was probably at its all-time peak naturally, and I was just geared up and ready to go. All of a sudden, something happened, and I don't know if you can relate, but I started getting overwhelmed from all of this input, just constant bloating of input. Got to read this book, got to listen to this thing, got to do this thing, got to go here, got to have this thing, got to make sure I do this. And by the time it's all said and done, I'm exhausted. And this got to a point where I had enough. And I got to a breaking point around 14 months of being in Vancouver, specifically living in downtown Vancouver. I think it was something around, I think I lived there around 10 months or something, or 12 months, something like that in that window, and got evicted 3 times, I think, in that time period. That's another story for another day. But while I was in Vancouver, I basically came to my wit's end. Here I was. I had moved to the city. I ended up opening up a business. I was a part owner in a flotation center, sensory deprivation takes. Go check that out if you haven't heard of that. Write a comment below if you want to know more about that. A lot of wisdom. That's where I've learned a lot of what I've learned as well. Assimilated the data. I lived downtown Vancouver in a high-rise building, so it was kind of strange. I was 25 and in a building where people work their whole life to get to the top of the building, live at one of these top of these buildings, right next to a beautiful Stanley Park in a pretty prestigious area. And you know, people work their whole life to kind of get here. I know that, and I say this humbly, but I remember sitting out on my deck looking down, and there was a grumpy old man at the time. Probably he wasn't that grumpy, and he had every right to be how he was based upon my living style, which was pretty erratic at that time. I was doing a lot of psychedelics. I was not emotionally stable, and I was about 8 months, 10 months on my sobriety journey, and this guy would write a lot of complaints. He was probably the guy that ended up getting me evicted, rightfully so. And these people worked their whole life to get to the top of the building. And here I was at the top of the building, overlooking Vancouver, the ocean, beautiful view, Stanley Park's right there. We got the penthouse at the top of the suite with my roommate. And I'm thinking, this is what people are working towards? I've been working so hard. I've been working out on my body. I've been working out on my mind. I've been doing all this personal development. I'm going to seminars, and I am absolutely just exhausted. And the worst part, no women. So this whole time I was doing this whole thing, and I was not good with women at that point. And, you know, I got sober, so I lost all my ability to talk to women and got super anxious, all this type of stuff. So I got super confused, and I ended up needing to take a break. So I did what anyone else would do in that position. I bought a one-way ticket actually to Mexico, and I went to Mexico looking to follow a dream, actually, because the city life, I wasn't working with it. It was exhausting. People were exhausted. I was exhausted. I was so done with like all this development and all this type of stuff. So I did go to Mexico, stayed there for about 6 months, and then I found myself going to Costa Rica. Now, why I was in Costa Rica was for a different reason. I watched this documentary in Vancouver called The Reality of Truth. For those that are interested in wanting to know about more ayahuasca, psychedelics, it's a really great video. There's a retreat center called Rhythmia. And in Rhythmia, they help people go through ayahuasca and take ayahuasca. So I thought, oh, wow, this is a great place. I want to go there. So I looked up the location. I bought a one-way ticket, ended up going to Costa Rica. And I found myself outside of Rhythmia, staying. It's actually in one of the most expensive lands in Central America. And I ended up staying there outside, about 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers outside of Rhythmia. I didn't have money at the time to actually purchase to go there. I think it was like $10,000 or something like that. And I didn't have that money, or didn't want to invest that on staying there. So my next theory was, just because they say no, paying money isn't the only way. And this is kind of like a side tangent. Paying money isn't the only way of exchange of value. Okay, I want you to consider that. Paying money isn't the only way to exchange value. You can add value, and this is something you want to know. If you're up and coming, they're known as Henrys. If you're an up and coming, that means you're looking to develop yourself, you're looking to develop your skills. You can offer your services for free. So for example, if you're someone that is a young person that's wanting to get around an influencer, this was me, then what you could do is you could offer your videography services for free. That's what I did. Maybe you are doing SEO. Maybe you have a skill at serving, whatever the types of skills that you have. If you're a young person, a Henry, an up and coming, you don't necessarily have to pay to be around the person. You can offer value in different ways. Value is exchanged in a bunch of different ways. Money is just one of the ways. So that was the thing that I knew, because I've done this multiple times in my life, because I didn't come from money and I didn't have money. So I needed to find creative ways to get around people that had money so that I could learn how to make money, ironically enough. And that worked actually over time. They started stacking on each other. And so I realized, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go volunteer. So before that, I ended up learning Spanish. So I'm like, I'm an asset because I'm a gringo that knows Spanish. I can interact with the staff, but I can also interact with the guests. Sure, they'll hire me. Nah, not the case. I ended up going there and they didn't let me in. And a long story, which doesn't relate to this story, but the point is, I ended up in Costa Rica. What brought me there was a documentary, watching The Reality of Truth. And then I flew to that area, got denied, and I was confused. And that led me to reading the book, the autobiography of Yogananda. And it's a pretty thick book, pretty powerful book. And I knew that I needed to read that book in my life. I just needed space to read it. And I ended up finding this place outside of Rhythmia, and I ended up staying isolated and did a lot of time on my own and working. And during that time period, I still kind of had the philosophy of the personal development mindset from the city. And I was there to decompress myself in that city vibe. And the jungle was a perfect place. And in that time period, I had all these books around me. So I was finished reading the autobiography of Yogananda. I was reading the book on happiness by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. I was reading another book. I had about 3 books, but an exercise that I used to do was I used to bring out the power of now, and I used to just flip to a page. And during this time period, I was in this personal development exhaustion. And I ended up flipping to a page that said, basically, it was asking Eckhart Tolle, which is the author of the book. And he said, Eckhart, if you ask me, I've done all the personal development, I've done all the workshops, I've gone to all these things, I'm listening to all this YouTube videos, I'm doing all these things. But if you actually ask me, am I happy or am I in contentment with myself? I got to say no. And that moment hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh my God, here I am. I've got 3 books around me while reading the Power of Now book. I'm journaling, doing all these things, all this activity, which here's the key point. Don't confuse activity with accomplishment. I'll say that again. Don't confuse activity with accomplishment. This is something key you got to understand, because it's not necessarily how hard you work. Right? You and I both know, just go drive right now. You might be driving or you might be at the gym. Just look around and there's a lot of people working really hard. Even in the gym, there's a lot of guys working hard in the gym. But you want to know what's interesting? I'm working a lot less hard and I'm getting way more results in the gym. I've been able to decode my body. It took me 4 years to decode my man body. So by the way, if you're a young person watching this, your man body will start basically around 28. Generally speaking, your body starts to memorize your metabolism around 28. Just like generally speaking, as a man, your brain fully develops between 24 and 26. So if you're a young person watching this and you're under that age, know that now your habits are going to start to solidify and remember your metabolism. I knew this before coming into 28. So I started doing all these things and understanding. But what happened was my body totally shifted. And your body's going to shift at different times in your life. And you can't be doing what you did at certain periods of your life later in your life. The game changes. And here's what I want you to understand. You've got to be okay with the game changing. Too many of you stay in the same paradigm and expect to get better results as you get older, but the game changes as you get older. Things change, things shift, reality shift, you shift. So you got to shift with the game. It's really important to be aware of that. What got you here is not going to get you there. That is key. What got you here It's not going to get you there. So when you go through that, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is how this personal development trap that you can get in. And I got in too. And so here I am reading this book. I'm doing all the things, and he says, don't do anything. And when he said, for you in the book, right? It's part of the question. He said in the book, for you, I do nothing. And that hit me in such intensity inside my body. I was in a space to receive that, by the way. Some things I'm going to share with you are going to go right over your head. And that's okay, because it's going to go right over your head into your subconscious mind. That's the power with this information. So you don't necessarily have to be paying attention to every single word that I say. But what's important is the transmission behind my words. See, I'm in the process of activating a lot of my language and activating my words. It's a specific process that you run in order to activate your words. When you activate those words, plus you've done the work, that means you're at the energetic levels to activate words. Now you can use your language to activate others. This is very powerful. This is being done on me, and I'm doing it on you. Get excited. So you don't have to pay attention to everything. That's very clear. But keep me in your ear and listen to the thought streams all the way through so that you can generate the benefits from it all. So I was reading the book, and I realized, oh my God, I am confusing activity with accomplishment. That means I'm doing all the things. That means I'm reading all the books, I'm journaling, I'm doing all the personal development stuff, and I am not really getting much progress because I'm just doing all the activity, right? Just like these people are working really hard, just like I used to work really hard in the gym. And then I learned my body. It took my body to learn my man body in basically 4 years. It took me to rework my body. Now I go into the gym, I work a lot less harder, and I get way more results. How many of, I know you're listening right now and you're wanting that. You're going, Matthew, I want more results by doing less. Why don't we? But I'm not going to tell you to do it through the classical Instagram way. No, that's a facade, okay? The Instagram way is a facade. Believe me, I went to the heart of the Instagram world, which is Bali in my opinion. But I went to the heart of the Instagram world, and it's not what it seems like, okay? So trust me, I went there, I went and lived around them, I went and lived that life. I've tried to live it myself, and I'm like, this is too much work, at least the way that I've seen a lot of people do it. They're working way too hard and not really getting that many results behind the scenes. Some people are, definitely, but there's some people that are really creating an illusion of what's really going on. And I was in that illusion, okay? So how can you do less, getting more results? So I was doing confusing activity with accomplishment, and I was doing all these things for my personal development to reach some sort of salvation. And I wasn't accomplishing that. I was just doing the activity. And so from that moment, I came to the realization that I need to actually not do that. I need to stop reading all these books. I need to stop journaling. I need to stop doing all this exercise and all these types of things in this moment for me where I was spiritually. And this is the key. I realized that I was approaching self-development with spirituality. I was approaching self-development the same way as spirituality. And these are two different concepts, two key concepts. You have to know the difference between the two. And so what happens to a lot of us is we try to seek the spirit the same way that we seek self-development. But let's look at that, or personal development. By the way, they're both amazing. They're both great. It's just helpful to have these separations of awareness. So before we go forward, I just want to tell you right now, you can stop, give yourself a break. Just slow down for a moment. You're doing enough, okay? I'm here to let you know you're doing enough, okay? You can let this land. This is a key core concept, is you have to be able to let this stuff land. You have to be able to let this land in your system. This is a key to success. So many of us strive our whole life and never actually arrive. We never actually get there. We never allow it to land in our system. And this is a practice. But this is not a practice through personal development. This is a spiritual practice, operates under different laws in my experience. So now that you've given yourself a break, you can just let this land, understand this. Personal development is more so for the exterior world. Now it drives from the inner world, and there's a lot of parallels, but there's a slight nuance. Personal development, actually in its definition, personal development means you're developing, which means there's an aspect of yourself that isn't whole. That means you're not enough. In the very act of development, and it's in a sub way, it means you're not enough. And so in the personal development world, we're constantly striving, and never arriving. And this is important that we understand as we shift our awareness. And now let's look at it from a spiritual level. From the spiritual level, we understand that we're whole. We understand that we're enough. And actually, when you understand this from a core fundamental level, you realize that you are your highest potential already. And there's just a form of releasing your abilities, which is a different angle. It's a different angle. Now, I hope that you're picking this up. So pay attention. You're releasing your abilities, your innate ability within you, what you came to this planet with already. You're releasing that ability. That means from who you already are enough. You're not switching or working or developing or all these types of things. But the way that you operate changes. It's not about the amount of data that you scrape, right? So essentially in personal development, we try to read as much books as we can, try to get as much data as we can, and that's great. That is great. It helps. It helps you develop your character in terms of your exterior world. It helps you get better professional skills, whether that's in sales, whether that's in communication, whether that's man to woman communication. By the way, if you haven't done so already, click the link below. Jump in our community, man to woman communication, authentic attraction club. We'd love to have you there. Teach a lot of the practicalities of man to woman communication. But at a deeper level, I want to offer you some real value. And this is at the deep depths, the spiritual depths. So in personal development, we scan data. And it's about accumulating as much data as possible. It's the accumulation of data. But in spirituality, it's about the depth of the data. Key concept. It's about the depth of the data. You're looking to go deep into one word, into one sentence. So it's not about the amount that you scan. It's about the depth that you understand. It's not about the amount that you scan. It's about the depth that you understand. And that's why you can read a spiritual text, just one sentence of a spiritual text, and contemplate that. The great late Bob Proctor used to read one page every 2 months of the book Think and Grow Rich to really set in. Now, I will say this spiritual depth really starts to come later on in life. Right now, you might be desiring some of the superficial things, and that's great, by the way, and never stop doing that. I'm not here to foo-foo that or put that down by any means. No, your self-image is expanding. Think about the universe, right? The universe is constantly expanding. We're constantly expanding. Our self-image is constantly expanding. Who we are is constantly expanding because from our core, we're enough. So your self-image, the material things around you, who's around you, what's around you, is an expression of your self-image. Your relationship with money right now and how it expresses itself is connected to your self-image around money. And so this is very powerful in the material world, but something you can consider. A lot of us live in a material world without realizing there's a whole spiritual world going on, but both exist. And in fact, what a lot of people do is they try to shift at the effect level. Now, hear me out on this. They try to shift at the effect level. That means they try to change material with material. And this is why you're getting exhausted by personal development, because you're trying to change the material with the material. The material is the effect of the cause. And the cause is at the spiritual or mental level. So we have to shift at the spiritual or mental level before we change the actual material level. And this is a key mistake a lot of guys make, specifically when it comes to man to woman communication. I can teach you all the nuances and structures and language patterns and verbal fluency and working on your personality and charisma and all these types of things, which is great, by the way. That's great, specifically when it comes to professional skills, because professional skills, you need those. But I'm talking about a deeper layer here. I'm talking about why you're actually exhausted by self-development. I'm talking about a spiritual level here where you could start feeling content, at ease, enjoy. You're arriving, you're allowing, you've shown up, you're here. Feel that one for a second. Feel that one for a second. You're here, you made it. So if you can, welcome that feeling in right now, because at a spiritual level, that's what's going to shift the material level. And for a lot of us, we think, oh, I got to do all this personal development. I got to learn all these AI things. I got to work. And by the way, in your professional life, if you're a Henry, you got to do that. That's something you got to do. You got to work on professional skills. You got to work on adding value. But we'll often see people that have reached a lot of these heights. And what happens? We all know this narrative. Be mindful of how you let this land, by the way, because I'm not foo-fooing people that have achieved a lot. No, I want to learn from them. I do learn from them, and I still have a lot to learn from them. But why is it that someone that achieves great heights like Tom Brady gets all these rings and once he's finished, just kind of not really happy? Well, that's great because at a physical level, accomplishment creates a great feeling, but it's momentarily. What I'm talking to you about here transcends the material. We're moving up levels here. Remember, the game's different at different stages. We're transcending levels here, and we're going to a higher spiritual level. If we look to the Hermetic laws, he talks about the first law is the law of mentalism. All is mind. Your mind is creating this reality as we speak. So as you're listening to me right now, look around, and all of this is being created by the mind, which is the causation of the effect of the material. So what we want to do is we need to shift at the causation level. And that's why the mind is so powerful. And that's why I work with my clients on the mind, at the mental level. We alchemize your mind. We take dense, low vibrational energy and we transmute it to high vibrational energy. We release blockages, samskaras, engrams, agreements, postulates that have been put on your mental mind and is holding you back. So right now, you're exhausted and you're thinking, if I just read that next book, the answer will just be in that next book. It will just be in that next video. And you're constantly in that striving. All this personal development stuff is getting exhausting. It's exhausting. And it's great because you want to build muscle. This is a great muscle. But we're talking about a deeper level here. The level of contentment, ease, arriving, letting it land, knowing that if nothing else changes, this is great. If nothing were to change right now, if nothing were to change, if it were to just stay like this, woo, wow, I'm grateful. If nothing were to change from this point onwards, if I lived like this from this point onwards, this is great. And anything from this is bonus. Wow. And it just keeps getting better. But I'm happy and grateful now. But how do I get there? Well, what's cool about that is you actually don't need another book for that. And I know that this is confusing because when I started my journey, I was in the same level of confusion. And if I were to listen to myself at points in my journey, I would say this: oh, that sounds all great. And for you, Mathew, because you figured it out. No, it took me a long time to figure this out. I've been the first guy that will tell you, you know Houdini? I'm like Houdini in terms of the escape artist. You know, I try to escape reality as much as possible. Drugs, women, alcohol, binge watching TV, movies, food, traveling, escapism, minimizing, criticizing, judging, all these types of ways. And I still fall victim to these at times in my life, right? Because we're growing as a conscious being. Our conscious awareness is starting to expand just like the universe, right? Like I was talking about. You are the universe. You're a microcosm of the universe. If we look at the world, it's constantly expanding. You in here are looking to expand, but what you're wanting to do is release your abilities. And by understanding on how that actually works, it's a mental level. So by you listening to the words that I'm sharing with you right now, you're in the process of transmuting energy inside your mental field. And by expanding and releasing those abilities, you now are gaining more power in order for you to create your own reality. And when you can create your own reality, you can basically have what you want. And whether this thing comes in, that thing comes in, or that thing comes in, it doesn't matter because you're content with where you are. But this is a shift, a fundamental shift we have to know and make the difference between personal development and spirituality. And what happens to a lot of people is they bring and adopt the spirituality or the personal development into the spirit. And they bring this idea of like, if I read all the spiritual texts and I start scanning, just like I did with the personal development, I get all this data. If I read all these spiritual books, maybe I'll get it. But it's about the depth, and that depth needs space. So let's talk about how do you start to create space? How do you start to create spiritual space? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. At the beginning, it's going to take a lot of conscious effort, right? Here's the thing one of my mentors always said to me. If you want the things to change in the life, you have to change the things in your life. And so this is going to take time, okay? But what are you going to do? Here's the thing. Just look at examples, right? You just look at examples and reverse engineer. If you've never heard of this concept before, it's a very powerful concept for you to understand. Now, if you've heard of it before, maybe listen to it in a new way. All right. There's always a power in listening to the same information in a new unit of time so that it filters into your subconscious mind. Reverse engineering is essentially you look at someone that has what you want and you look at what did they do to get there? What were the steps that they took to get there? What were the things I did? So for example, maybe you're looking at me right now or you're listening to me and you're thinking, okay, well, how I want to reverse engineer that state of contentment, that state of arriving, that state of being here, that state of like, oh, if nothing else changes, this is great, right? You're wanting to reverse engineer that. Well, part of that is look at where I've gone to. I've not done drugs and I'm talking, and I'm not judging because I was the first one to do any of these types of things. But I currently haven't done any type of drugs, no like Advil, none of that stuff for, I mean, in years, but like I'm talking the other kind of drugs. I've not done any of that in like 4 or 5 years. I'm coming up 10 years sober from cocaine and alcohol. I am no longer binge having sex with random girls all around the world. I have a beautiful relationship. I'm married now. Come on, man. The game changed for me. The game changed. It changed for me. I couldn't operate how I used to operate. It wasn't working for me. I got to some of these heights and was not feeling that feeling. Take this in. I really want you to take this in. So if you're working out right now, just pause. If you're driving, pause. If you're washing dishes, just pause for a moment. Take this in. Brother, I went to Vegas. I lived in a very beautiful place. I got good with women. I had women that were around me. I could sleep with them. I was interacting with them with ease. I was making money. I was empty. I was empty. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that if that's your journey, that's great. But like, look at the extent I went to. Like I went all in. I'm one of those guys that went all in. Plus, I did it sober, man. I did it sober. I can tell you, I was the only guy other than my mentor that I know in across this work that have done this sober. If you could, I could have learned this stuff while I was drinking because I just don't have to feel things. But to feel it and do it, oh my God, that takes a level. I'll tell you, I don't know. I can just talk from my own experience. But man, as soon as I got sober, I got so anxious. I mean, that's why I had to start learning all this stuff because I completely lost my ability on how to talk to women. I completely was out to lunch, had no idea how to talk to women. So I'm like, I got to figure this out. Like, this is bad. This is my deepest, darkest pain. It comes from childhood, being the small runt, and I got to figure this out. So I went all in. I'm like, I'm figuring this out. And I went to Vegas sober and got to that height. Okay, I got to that mountain. I climbed that mountain, man. And I can tell you, I was not feeling that feeling, far from it. And in fact, I felt a way worse feeling because at least when I was striving towards that peak, I had this idea, this fantasy, this unconscious fantasy that my life was going to be better once I got there. And ain't that the truth, you know, to only realize you actualized your dream and it wasn't what it was. It wasn't what it was made out to be. It wasn't about how it was programmed in me. Oh, I'll be this guy with all these women around and have all this access and all this stuff. And it was empty. It fulfilled a part of me, the unconscious need for approval, unconscious need for validation. That filled that. I got that. But guess what? When you need to be filled unconsciously for validation, there's never enough. When's enough? For a drug addict, when is it enough? When it's never enough. There's no amount. I don't know if you're an addict or have addiction personalities like I do. It's never enough. There's never enough. There's never enough. No. I want more. Give me more. There's never enough. There's never enough. You never arrive. You never actually feel content. You never actually feel whole. You never actually receive. You never actually let it land. It's never enough. I got to that point. I was really upset. I was actually angry and I decided to leave. And so what I came to realize from that time period and what I want you to understand is this. We really want to be mindful of the spiritual side of ourselves because I got really good at skill sets. I got really good at opening. I got really good at merging sets. I got really good at cold approach. I got really good at day game. I got really good at attracting women. I got good at keeping attraction levels high. I got good at pumping my state. I got good at pumping their state. I got good at language patterns. I got good at vocal variety and tone and when to say things. I got good at body language. I got good at charisma. I got good at energy transference. I got good at eye contact. I got good at all this things. Yeah, I got good. I did it all sober. I did during the day primarily. And then I did nightclub stuff as well. Lifestyle design. Teach this stuff. And I want you to understand this stuff. These are core fundamentals to understand. You got to understand. But you also got to understand there's a deeper level here. And this is the fundamental thing that a lot of guys aren't talking about on the interweb is that they're not talking about the discontentment of that lifestyle. And by the way, maybe that is, but I'm talking to you about the spiritual practice here now. And what was happening is I was so aware. By the way, every morning I meditated. I woke up in order to stay like sane. By the way, sober person in Vegas, to stay sane, I woke up, and as soon as I woke up, I put the timer on my phone, 45 minutes. So the first thing I did, I woke up, I sat up in my bed. Ideally, you don't do this, but I was just in desperate mode with your meditation practice. But I just sat up in my bed and meditated. Plus, I was in float tanks, floating as well. Now, if you don't know what floating is, I encourage you to research it, but it's basically a meditation pod. And I was reflecting on everything. So, I grew quite quickly. I understood things and I was aware of a lot. So even though I didn't go to some of the heights that some of these guys have gone to in the like on the internet, and I'm talking about like I still got a lot of results. And here's what I can say with this. I got enough results to know that I'm not happy here. Because if you're meditating and you're aware and you're sober in these environments doing these actions, you feel right away. By the way, for those guys that are watching or listening to this, and you have the courage to be sober, because it takes courage, I want to recognize you. And if you have that desire to be sober, maybe you don't have to be like completely sober. If you're someone like with my personality type, I got to completely stop. It takes courage to feel. Because basically what you're saying is I'm putting my hand up and I'm ready to feel. I'm ready to feel life. And you want to learn about yourself? I encourage you, go sober for a month. Go sober for 2 months. Go sober for 6 months. I remember I was talking to a guy once and he's like, yeah, I got sober. I'm like, oh, okay, you got sober. Okay, awesome. So you still know? I didn't need to go for that long. I'm like, okay, so what happened? He says, oh, I got sober for like 6 months and then stopped. I'm like, oh, interesting. Why did you stop? I just didn't need to be sober anymore. I didn't explore deeper, but really from my interpretation with what I know inside my own self is that's where the things started to come up that needed to be faced, that aren't faced, which are the things that's stopping you from feeling content. Ironically, the things that you're doing right now, if you are partaking in these actions, which is I do not judge because I was there and been there and had my own struggles and still working through some of the things, which is releasing my abilities. But the overarching hum of my vibration is happy and grateful that I'm here now. And if it doesn't get better, this is great as it is, but it just keeps getting better. I want that for you, that hum, that vibration, that arriving, letting it land, letting this in your system, all your development that you've done, allowing yourself to just not feel exhausted and overwhelmed by reality because there's so much happening, And ironically, if you shift at a higher level and you play the game differently, the game changes for you. So do you want to play chess or checkers? Chess or checkers. They both are great games, incredible games to play, and both have times at different purposes. But I would encourage you to play chess with me. Come to a higher level. And I'm not saying any levels lower or higher than each other. They're just different. But at this level, you're going to get what you want a lot quicker. You don't have to go through a lot of the garbage and the programming and the things that have been distracting you from what really matters. And what I mean by that is you're peeling back all the layers of all the programming, the approval from your friend group, needing to be this certain person in order to get a certain result. I'm talking at the spiritual level, not at the material level. Peeling back all these layers and who and what do you really want? Free from programming, free from childhood traumas, free from addictions, free from distractions. What do you really want in that space? I'm talking the space where you're alone. No one else is around. That space that you enter if you go to nature. And you spend some time isolated in nature and there's no one else around. Who and what do you want from that place? Because that's really where your core heart desire lies. And then from that place, once you have this pure place, because it's kind of like you have to wash off the dirt of yourself and get to that pure place within. What do you want from there? Because now you have the personal development. And now you have the personal development. Now you learn the techniques. Now you learn the strategies. Now you learn how to have the eye contact. Now you learn the body language, the vocal variety. You start to interact. Oh, baby, you're going to get way better results. Plus, who are you going to attract from that pure place? Right? You're going to start feeling whole and you're going to attract from a whole place rather than from an empty place that needs development. But like I said, there's different rules to different games, different laws at different levels. The game changes. What you do at the beginning is not going to get you to where you want to go at the end. So if you look at wealthy people, a lot of them started off trading their time for money. That's how they started. They traded their time for money. And that's how a majority of people make their money on this planet, is they trade their time for money. And you betcha they work hard. I'm one of them. I was a laborer digging ditches. I was digging ditches. I can remember, I'm right now in Canada and it's cold while I'm recording this. I haven't been in the cold. By the way, I haven't been in this cold in like 10 years or 8 years or something like this. It's like, I don't know. And some people watching this, it's even colder where they are. I haven't been in this kind of cold in a while. It's actually kind of nice to be back in it, feel a bit of that. But I can remember I used to dig ditches in this weather. I used to be out in the cold, bundled up, my hands frozen, worked on the rigs and all these types of things. That's hard work. Busting your back, hurting your body. Oh man, working hard. And guess what? For peanuts. For peanuts. I think back to how hard I worked making peanuts. But now it's a lot different. So the game changes depending on the levels you're playing at. This is the same for basically your awareness journey or your self-actualized journey, becoming content within. Because now that you're happy and grateful for where you are and right here, right now, if you come to that heart desire, free from programming, free from distractions, free from addictions, now you go set out to do that action. And with one action, it has a 10 times the amount of effect. Core concept, understand leverage. I want you to really understand leverage, because that's how the game changes, is you start to understand leverage. And you understand that with the big enough lever, you can lift really heavy objects. Really things that wouldn't even budge before. You get the right leverage point and that baby will move with not much effort. So what we want to do is the leverage point in your life right now is coming to the spiritual level, is shifting on the mental spiritual plane, which then affects the material plane, which then gets you the result you want. But because the result you want's coming from a pure place, untraumatized and not distracted and not programmed, and you've sat with yourself and you come into your heart and you genuinely, free from programming, have this desire from whatever you came. I love this thought experiment, right? Like think of the year you were born and think about 2 years before that you were born. Think of the year that you were born and think about 3 years before. Where were you? What were you? Did you have your name? Where were you? 4 years. Where were you? 4 years before you were born. Where were you? What were you? Think about that. Think about that. So now that you come into that place in meditation or free from distraction, you can start connecting. What did you come here for? What did you want to experience? What's the experience you want to experience here? What did you come here for? Start tuning into that. That's a very pure, potent place. And there's a lot of data in there. There's a lot of data in there. Then remember, it's not about the amount of data, it's the depth of the data. If you can connect to that depth, that gives you a lot of power. A lot of power. Now, the actions you take are conscious. And now as you step, each step is much more intentional and it comes with much more ease. And the biggest one for a lot of you here, you're not in a rush. I want to ask you that right now. How nice would it be to not be in a rush anymore? To not be in a rush to actually get through it. And in fact, you'd slow down and you'd actually start gaining more and more results. You start to gain more. Isn't that strange? You're slowing down and you're gaining more and more results. You're doing less work and you're making more. You're talking to less women, yet more women are attracted to you. You have this ability. It's within you. But how do you want to play this game? Do you want to just think about the material surface level, which is important, or do you want to shift at a higher vibrational level? You want to take these dense energies inside your system, inside your mental field, and transmute them. We take these low vibrational energies and transmute them to high vibrational energies. You alchemize. Okay, the best way that I like to think about this, think of the mind like a property. It's an energetic property, okay? The mind has an energetic property to it, okay? And there's different frequency bands on your mind field, okay? So it's not that crazy. You can just go look at brain waves and you'll see all the brain waves. Gamma, theta, or gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta, right? Those are the bands of frequency. And in those bands are thought streams or thought fields, or what's also called postulates. These are dense energies inside your mind field. If you look at the work of Dr. Roger Callahan, he talks about this quite deeply. He has this technique called thought field therapy. And these tappings, you basically do this tapping and it's connected to meridians in the body. And these meridians in the body are also holding energy inside your body. Really encourage you to do your own research on this. Go down a wormhole of meridians in the body in terms of Eastern understanding. There's a lot of knowledge there, a lot of knowledge. I think it's called like a biosynchronization machine where they can actually measure the energy channels through your meridians, which is cool stuff to look at least cool stuff to consider. By the way, science is just slowly catching up to spirituality, what spirituality already knows. So you could skip a level and just go to the spiritual, and then you'll learn what quantum physics, quantum mechanics are starting to discover, which is pretty powerful stuff. But that's cool where we're at. And so your mind basically is expressed itself in the body, and in the body are holding different parts of where you've had trauma. And in the mind, these are called engrams, postulates, or samskaras. And they're basically dense negative energy, or just dense energy that have been created from at some point in your life. And this is why you working at the personal development level, just working and not getting different results is not really shifting. That's why if you work at the spiritual level and you understand this stuff, you understand the law of mentalism from the Hermetic laws, and you understand that there's a game change difference between spirit and personal development, then what will happen is you start to 80-20, you gain that leverage, and you start working on this part of yourself. And it's not really work. It might feel like that, but it's not really work. It's just releasing your abilities. So you start to release and transmute these energies inside your mental field and your subconscious mind that have been created from some point in your childhood, and they start to transmute. And the way I like to think about this is imagine your mental field is like the property of water, right? So if you were to freeze water, the structure of it changes, but the actual property doesn't. So now you've taken water, you've transmuted its property to ice. Now you take that same ice and you transmute that property into steam. It's still the same water from before, it's just transmuted. Now that steam turns to air, and then that air condenses into a cloud and comes back down into water. Your mind is the same way. On these thought fields, on these bands of frequency, are dense energy that are holding you back from truly getting what you want in life. There's a ton of energy bands right now and frequencies in your mental field around man to woman communication. Because you've genetically not come here learning this stuff, you've maybe not had a role model to teach you this stuff, or you've had a bunch of negative experiences at the beginning of your journey, which then created all these deposits, these agreements, these stories about yourself. And then now when you go to talk to a woman, they get activated and boom, you're lost. Completely, mind goes blank. You have no idea what to say. You just get stuck in the small talk loop, or you get stuck in the friend zone. You have no idea how to communicate to her. And now you're just completely lost. And then when you think about interacting with them, it's so painful. But then you think about not interacting with them, and that's even more painful. So then you ask yourself, which way do I go? And you go, I'll smoke weed. That's my solution. I'm not going to go talk to them, but I don't want to sit in my pain, so I'll smoke weed. And I did that for a very long time too. So I'm not judging. I drank, did all that stuff. So that was a way to escape out of the pain, right? Not facing the dense energy in the mental field, also in the spirit, right? And the spirit level is another dimension that we're not going to go into here today. But I'm kind of mixing the two together, the mental and the spirit, but they are slightly different. But today I want to get you results in terms of shifting causality. And when you shift at the mental level, and you transmute these energies, it's very, very powerful, because now they've transmuted, they've gone from low vibrational energy to high vibrational energy. Now your actions with your intention is coming from a whole place, so that when you get results, you actually get the feeling that you've been looking for. I want you to consider that. Imagine setting a goal and understanding that this goal, what you're really looking for is a feeling. I want to drive that sports car. No, not really. You want the feeling of driving that sports car. You want to be recognized. You want to stand out. And nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. You want to feel like you're accomplished. It's whatever goal you're after, ask yourself why. Why? Ask yourself at least 3 times, why, why, why? Why do I want that thing? What will it do to, what would make me feel? Because ultimately, every goal that we go after in our life is we're really just looking for a feeling. And that feeling is really what we're after. So you can skip levels if you just focus on the feeling. But what happens is a lot of us set goals from a traumatized place, accomplish things looking to fill a hole. I did that in Vegas. I did that in Vancouver. I went to go look to fill a hole and did not work. It plugged it up, but it didn't fill it. And what filled it was transmuting it through a bunch of different series of things and practices that if you come into our authentic attraction club, I can let you know kind of towards the end of our calls, after I share with you the practicality stuff, then we do some workshopping, and I'm going to start helping you transmute this energy, help you start shifting at a vibrational mental level where now things become a lot easier. You're much more intentional. And then the interesting thing is this: results come in faster and easier, unlike anything ever before. And it's a creation. It's like painting. You're more excited, you want to create more, and you get excited and you get amplified by your actions, and you're not exhausted by your actions, and you might totally pivot your direction in life, but that's okay because you are happy and grateful for where you are now. So action steps today. What do I do now? Great, I have this concept, I have this idea. What do I do? First of all, give yourself a break. Right now, you're doing enough. You've got enough done. You're doing more than enough. You're on your way, okay? You're on your way. You're doing more than enough, okay? Life is not a race, okay? Life is not a race. You don't want to get through this thing as quick as possible. It's not a race. Understand that concept. Let that into your system, okay? It's a practice. This is a practice of awareness, a practice of letting it in your system. It's something you do internally. So how do you do that? Well, that might look like going for a walk without listening to anything and just taking in the nature. That might be walking in nature. For me, that's meditating. What does that look like? That means sitting my butt on the ground and meditating, closing my eyes, not listening to anything, and breathing into my heart and letting this reality land inside myself. It might be listening to a beautiful song that takes you into the moment. It might be dancing, it might be exercising, swimming, whatever thing that allows you to feel into that space. Generally speaking, the best way is going to just be meditation, and there's no quick way to that. So if you haven't created a meditative practice, or you're struggling to create a meditative practice, comment below in this video and I'll share with you different ways that we can start welcoming that into your practice. It's going to have an immense ROI on your inner feelings. And you're not going to get to the end of your goals feeling empty. You'll allow it to land and receive, but this is a practice. Before you go to bed, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking before you go to bed? What are your thoughts when you wake up? How do you think? That's a great place to start. Start auditing your thoughts when you wake up. Audit your thoughts before you go to bed, because you can rewire your mind. And finally, join AAC if you'd like. And we'll teach you some of the stuff. We'll teach you the practical sides of man-to-woman communication, but we'll also go a little bit deeper. For those that are interested, this stuff's not for everyone, and that's totally okay. But if you're listening here, you're probably one of those people. So if you're not inside already, I'd encourage you to join AAC and join our community. We got an incredible community of guys on this movement looking to really start to understand man-to-woman communication, but ultimately we understand it's not about the women outside, it's about us on the inside. And by shifting and having that understanding, we'll create new realities for us. So, very powerful podcast. We went over the differences of personal development to spirituality. We understood that the personal development's more so on the effect, and the spiritual aspect is more so at the cause. And by shifting the cause, it will shift your effect. And then from there, we started to understand the importance of not confusing activity with accomplishment and just trying to do all this development stuff. And we understood that scanning data is through personal development, and really at the spiritual level is where you take data and take it to its depth. And you go to the deeper levels. And by shifting there, you're going to get what you want. And by setting your goals from this place, they'll actually give you the feeling that you were actually looking for in the first place. And if you start there and then go into your goals, you'll actually achieve your feeling instead of getting there and being like, man, this wasn't what it was. So very, very powerful podcast today. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below, and looking forward to seeing you inside AAC. May you never be be the same. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.